A warm welcome to the Health and Performance Booster series, powered by Hintsa Performance and Check-up Center Hirslanden. In this series, we aim to help you improve your health and performance with measurable results. Because after all, better performance is a byproduct of improved health and well-being. My name is Claudia Oeken and I'm the head of Central Europe at Hintsa Performance. In today's session, we talk about physical activity and why it matters now more than ever. We will unpack what it takes to incorporate more physical activity into your daily life and how to make sustainable changes. We will also tackle some common misconceptions around physical activity. And in this respect, I'm delighted to welcome our experts from Hintsa Performance and Hirslanden today. Dr. Anna Erat, live here, and Owen Satterley, remotely. Anna and Owen, hello, good seeing you. And may I ask you to briefly introduce yourself?
Well, it's a pleasure being here today. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, as you know, I'm a medical director at the clinic here in London in Zurich, particularly specialized in prevention, personalized prevention, sports medicine, but also in epidemiology. And in these times of the COVID pandemic, of course, it has come in very, very handy. In addition to that, I work very closely with Hintsa Performance, as you know, with your athletes and also with your corporate clients. And so I would say that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. Owen, a few words about yourself.
Yeah, hi there. I'm very happy to be here today. I've been coaching with Hintsa for just over 2 years now and spending most of that time working with Formula One engineers and more recently working with high-level international business leaders. I've spent time working in professional sport as a strength and conditioning coach, and the topic of today is something that I spend a lot of time speaking with my executive clients about. So I'm really excited to get into it.
Thank you. Anna, let me start with the first question to you. We are all aware that physical activity matters, but why now more than ever? And is there anything particular what has changed maybe in COVID times?
Absolutely. I'm not sure whether it's now more than ever, but the pandemic has become a little bit of a catalyst. And we see a lot of people in home office. They work at home. They don't take the bike to work. They don't take the elevator, they don't take the stairs, rather, up to the 4th, the 5th, or the 6th floor. So anyone who's counting steps on any kind of a gadget, they realize that it's radically reduced. So rather than taking 10,000 or 18,000 steps a day, just by taking the stairs, going to the bus, taking the metro, they do nothing. So this, of course, has led to a little bit something we called COVID fat, unfortunately. A lot of people have gained weight. It's really quite a clear trend. Other people have taken this opportunity with home office to really get fit and go out. But unfortunately, with lockdowns all around the world, we haven't had the same opportunity in some countries or some cities. In Switzerland, we've been very, very fortunate. So we could go out, we could go training, could do a bit of parkour and so forth. Nevertheless, we see this trend. And the other important factor is that when people sit in home office, a lot of times they don't have the same kind of a working space and chairs and desks as they do at work. So they might sit at the kitchen table and they might not have the position and the kind of space that they should be having. And so they complain about pain in the back, the neck, muscle stiffness, and so forth. So that's, of course, also a very important aspect of this pandemic or consequence of this pandemic. And then the mental aspect. The mental aspect is, of course, huge as well. We see much more depression, reactive depression, on most levels. And there, as we know, there's plenty of evidence that shows that exercise helps and is partially a therapy also in depression and depressive developments. So here as well, exercise is crucial. Not only in the pandemic times, but through this catalytic process, we have realized it even more.
Following up on that, physical activity is a broad field. For one, it's maybe walking in the wood with a dog or gardening. For the other, it is the 20K high endurance running or doing a heavy workout in the gym. So from a medical perspective, how do you define physical activity in a well-being context?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, because as I said before, just taking the stairs or taking the metro and taking up the stairs to get to the proper platform and out of the tunnels is already exercise. And when we add that up on a daily basis, the small things that we do when we go to the office, that's exercise. That's also defined as exercise. The WHO recommends at least 150 minutes of endurance training or exercise per week. But that includes also really vigorous gardening or taking the stairs very quickly. But if you really want to see proper results, you need more than 300 minutes. And again, it doesn't have to be very vigorous running. It doesn't have to be Olympic swimming. It can really be small things like biking or taking the stairs.
Owen, looking at you and referring a bit to what Anna said, there was a recent study, I think, from the University of St. Gallen, and apparently in times of COVID, people have gained weight on average more than 3 kilos. Does this weight gain has only something to do with nutrition, or is there also a physical aspect behind it?
It's certainly both. But if we look at this purely from a physical activity perspective, something that Anna's just alluded to is that for a lot of people, moving to 100% work from home has seen their daily activity levels drop quite considerably. I've been working with clients that would normally pre-COVID have been around the 12 to 15,000 steps a day mark on their activity tracker. And then sitting in back-to-back meetings at home, we're finding that their daily activity is down around 4,000 steps. So quite a sizable decrease. And when we look at your total daily energy requirements, we start to understand why the weight gain has come. Because people are eating the same amount of food and not accounting for the drastic kind of decrease in their levels of physical activity. And we've had to find ways of reincorporating that for our clients in a way that kind of mimics them being at the office, where they might have to walk up and down several floors just to get to their office, and then do the same thing in between meetings. Being in front of a screen all day has massively affected that for certain. And along with them not changing their nutritional habits to meet their kind of caloric needs based on the decrease in activity is why we've seen this weight gain through the pandemic.
Anna, we know that endurance training is important to prevent chronic diseases such as diabetes, obesity, high blood pressure. Can you explain the audience in an easy way what exactly happens in our body if we don't do any cardio activities?
With pleasure. So as you said before, cardio means endurance training. Equally important is of course also strength training, but I will focus on the cardio in this question. So cardio is very important because first of all, it lowers the blood pressure. And blood pressure is one of the leading risk factors for heart attacks, for strokes, and these are of course two of the leading causes of death and morbidity in the world. Equally though, in cancers, such as, for instance, colon cancer, which is something that we would never expect. 10% of colon cancers can be prevented just through lifestyle and exercise, which is huge. And equally important, of course, also various degenerative mental and brain disorders and diseases such as Alzheimer's, various dementias. So exercise from that point of view, and now lowering the blood pressure, is very important. It also targets risk factors such as obesity and overweight. So when you do exercise, you keep your caloric intake at the same level, but do more exercise, cardiovascular exercise, you obviously lose weight. And that is very beneficial for instance, the blood pressure. And when the blood pressure goes down, the risk of heart attacks or stroke decreases tremendously. And the second, another very important impact is, for instance, by diabetes. So in the Middle East, up to 25% of the adult population suffer from prediabetes or diabetes. And here, the impact of cardiovascular exercise is huge, because in type 2 diabetes, that we call it classically or traditionally, which is the adult type, the main adult type of diabetes, it's not really that the insulin isn't produced, but there's a resistance in the periphery, by the cells in the periphery. And we can decrease this resistance, insulin resistance, by exercise. And this is, of course, can have an immense impact on the health and well-being of populations all around the world.
Owen, we knowledge worker, we often sit at our desk for 8 to 10 hours, sometimes then even followed by additional hours on our digital devices. Does regular exercise make up such a sedative lifestyle?
If we stick with the theme from the weight gain point of view, probably not. If we consider that, a vigorous workout might burn somewhere in the region of 300 to 500 calories in an hour. If you are sat for that long in a day, that workout is not going to replace the fact that you could have been on your feet more. And if we look at some slightly older research, I think from about 2014, there was some research done into calorie expenditure, looking at the difference between sitting and standing. Per minute, standing burns about 0.7 calories more than sitting. So if you could stand for an additional 3 hours in your workday, over the course of a work year, you'd burn somewhere close to an additional 30,000 calories. And they kind of go unnoticed. That 30,000 calories is roughly the equivalent of running 10 marathons, which is a lot of work. I've run one in my lifetime, and it was hard work. So it can't really make up for it. It'll obviously help to blunt the negative effects of it. But if we want to optimize a healthy lifestyle, we need to find ways of spending more time on our feet and moving, because those small micro additions to our daily habits actually end up with quite macro level results, very significant results in terms of the return on the investment of standing.
Yeah, and referring to that, another question to you. Particular back-to-back meetings in front of the screen lead to tiredness, lack of concentration, but also back and neck pain. And honestly, I doubt that will change a lot, even if we get back to the hybrid mode of working, also in the office and at home. So what are your top tips to reboost energy and avoid this kind of pain?
Motion is lotion, right? Our bodies are made to move. We're designed to move, and finding ways of incorporating that into the workday. So for an example, with my clients, what I get them to do when we know that their work is office-based and they're sat in front of a screen for a long time, is I ask them to try and categorize their meetings into meetings that actually require them to be on the screen, or if there's going to be a slide deck, for instance, where there's information that they need to look at and digest, that would be a seated meeting.
I love the motion is lotion. We always say exercise is medicine, but motion is lotion. I like that.
Thank you. I can't remember where I got it from, so I can't pay credit to it, unfortunately. But yeah, I use that a lot. In terms of the categorization of the meetings, we have our seated meetings, which is important because of the amount of information that my clients are dealing with. But there are meetings that are more auditory in nature. What I asked them to do is whether or not they could have their camera off in that time and actually move around the office. Our thoracic spine and shoulder and scapula in particular, and our hips and lower back, they really don't like being still. They like movement in 3 dimensions. And so in that time, I ask them to stand up and I give them specific movements for those areas of the body, and we focus in on areas that are of a specific problem for them. Then there's also another form of meeting, which is a little bit more relaxed. There's possibly where they do one-to-one calls with their direct reports and members of their team. And we've actually got an agreement with quite a few of them now that they do them walking, because it's just a phone call, effectively. And what I'm noticing is that I've recently had clients go from 6,000 or 7,000 steps a day up to close to maybe 20,000 steps a day, because they've got 4 hours of walking meetings now in their afternoon kind of scheduled in. And whilst it's not a difficult task and they're still getting to do their work and be productive, the long-term health gains of that will not go unnoticed.
Actually, you can probably be more focused even during those meetings if you don't always sit particularly for 10 hours in a row. So getting a bit of exercise. And in any case, a lot of people say that they have to turn off the camera because of the internet connection not being so great. And so I think it's equally legitimate to say I have to turn off the camera because I'm going to do some exercises while I'm listening to you. I think that's legitimate.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just a culture within each of the institutions that the client works in. But because they are senior leaders, they're actually in a position to affect that change, which is great. And it puts them in a position of real influence to affect not just their own health, but the health of their teams and the entire workforce within the companies that we're working with, which is fantastic.
Anna, looking back to you, I think I would like to talk also a little bit with you about the importance of resistance training. I think there is still some misconception with some people that they believe it is only being in the gym, doing heavy weight training. As a medical doctor, how do you define resistance training, and why is it as important for us as human beings than cardio sports?
We try to be as pragmatic as possible because we have top athletes, Formula 1 drivers, Ironman triathletes, ice hockey players, soccer players. We have really a broad palette. But we also have just hobby athletes, sportsmen, and people who have been home for the last 30 years and want to start moving again. So we need to be quite pragmatic, of course, also differentiate between which person we're talking to and individualize our recommendations. So it very much depends on the possibility and the person we're talking to. But resistance training in general is just as important as cardiovascular training. So if you look at astronauts, for instance, one of the main problems when they go to space, where the G-force is not there anymore, where the resistance against the G-force can't be practiced anymore, leads to, for instance, osteoporosis, which is a huge problem. So there are all kinds of programs in place by NASA, for instance, to keep the astronauts somewhat fit to be able to do resistance training in space. But there's no G-force, so you can't do resistance training if there's no G-force. So they have developed all kinds of programs that they can do in order to keep themselves fit and not lose too much of the bone mass, which is detrimental, of course. And so when you ask me what is resistance training, well, traditionally here on Earth, it's the resistance or the force we need to exert against the G-force. And that can be by body weight, push-ups, sit-ups. It can also, of course, be with dumbbells, stretching, stretch bands, whatever you can use in order to use your muscles and improve your muscle strength. We have seen, of course, that sometimes very vigorous, not well coordinated and planned resistance exercise can lead to overuse, can also lead to injuries. So there, for instance, it's always important when you start from nothing to be sure to consult people, coaches that have a lot of experience. And you can always start with your own body weight. That's easy. Just like Owen said before, while you're having a conference call, a video call, just using the water bottle to increase your or improve your muscle mass and exercise your muscles is already a good step. Or perhaps not sitting on the chair, but almost sitting on the chair while you're on the conference call. That's already a great exercise. And then, of course, depending on what you want to reach and depending on what level you're at and depending on what kind of a top athlete you are, you might have to improve that quite significantly.
But I can imagine. Yeah. And actually, Owen, looking at you, I would like to dig a bit deeper into that topic because I actually heard that some gyms are currently having problems getting their members back into the gym. What do you think is the reason for that? Have our habits already changed in the months of the pandemic? Are people now doing more exercise at home or outside, or don't they do sports anymore?
I think that there's a large population of people that have been told that the gym is the place where you go to get fit and healthy. And they've gone purely out of extrinsic motivation, right? They've gone because a specialist or a doctor or a coach has told them, or a social media influencer has told them that the gym is the place to go to achieve your health and fitness goals. Now, if the pandemic has shown us one thing, it's that's not the case. And people have rediscovered various forms of fitness. You know, people have fallen back in love with the great outdoors, which is just wonderful. You know, the ability to realize that exercise means very different things to different people. You know, we alluded to it much earlier on. And I've got clients who are very vigorous walkers and they hike a lot, particularly over the weekends, and that's their main form of vigorous activity, but they do several hours of it over the course of the weekend. What we've noticed, especially locally around me, is that people are using playgrounds and parks to use as gym equipment. You know, there are outdoor gyms that are popping up all over the place now for people to use. You don't have to go to what can be quite an intimidating environment for some people. And so people are changing their habits because things are becoming more accessible. A gym for some people has been a very daunting place to go. And therefore, the friction of building that healthy habit of exercising has been very difficult. Whereas once the gyms were closed, they've had to get a little bit creative with how they do it. And it's actually worked to their benefit. And people are doing more exercise at home. I've got several clients now who have invested in small pieces of very inexpensive gym equipment that Anna's alluded to, things like the stretch bands, the resistance bands, and various other little things like suspension trainers and some lighter dumbbells that just offer a little bit of resistance. Because ultimately, you don't need a lot of additional external load to make an exercise quite challenging, particularly if you're starting out for the very first time. And so whilst it's been frustrating for regular gym goers that gyms were closed over the past year and a half, for a lot of people where their health has just suffered because the gym wasn't somewhere they wanted to be, there's actually been, I think, a net positive here. And fitness and health has become far more accessible because people have changed their perception of what exercise is or what they can do for exercise.
You also have some marvelous apps and online instructions and programs that you can easily follow also at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, exercise is, well, the best form of exercise for you to do is one that you actually enjoy. So you can use technology to do that. You can use an accountability group to do that. There are various ways of helping you achieve the health and fitness goals that you've got.
Thank you. I think a lot of tips for our audience to consider. Anna, as a hobby triathlete myself, I've often experienced that after a training, even if I was completely exhausted and it was a hard training, it had a positive impact on my mood. And I was wondering, what is the neurophysiological link between physical activity and mental well-being, mental fitness? How can sport boost this, but also can be harmful?
Mm-hmm. So there are some neurotransmitters that are very important and also well known, such as, for instance, let's say serotonin. So the most important antidepressants are based on serotonin, and they inhibit the reuptake of serotonin. And but there are also other hormones and neurotransmitters that are extremely important in boosting the mood. And sports are well known to stimulate the production of these neurotransmitters. So that's from the hormonal side and the neurotransmitters, but also the sympathetic nervous system has an important impact on your mood and on your well-being. And also there, of course, we know that sports has an important impact on the sympathetic nervous system. And last but not least, which when we go back to hormones again, cortisol, which is our stress hormone in our body, is also very receptive to sports and to exercise. So when we're very stressed, the cortisol levels tend to go up. They are elevated. And through sports, we can bring them back to a normal level. And we can measure that also through heart rate variability and so forth. So it's not only something that we feel, but we can also objectively measure the impact. So sports, exercise, crucial for mental well-being and for happiness.
Interesting.
I think there's also an important consideration around the social aspect of this as well. You know, being involved in team sports or being involved in exercise classes. You want to talk about neurotransmitters. I mean, oxytocin is a very powerful one. And when you have that social connection with people that we've missed, right, for such a long time, also in terms of mental well-being is such a significant kind of role to play. And then additionally, in terms of helping people actually achieve their goals, the accountability of the peer-to-peer side of things helps keep people honest and consistent in terms of the pathway to their goals.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and particularly people that have to be in home office or were in home office for the past year and a half. We're sitting there alone or with a few family members. So having the time of the day to go out to a park, exercise together in a group, of course, had a huge impact. And so I fully agree with you on that one. Yeah.
Owen, another question to you, given that we at Hintsa, we work with Formula One drivers, but also teams. What has been your experience working with the Formula One trackside team members in this respect?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the context of what I've spoken about today has been my experience with one of our kind of trackside clients. And these guys have a hectic travel schedule. So they sit on planes a lot. They sit on shuttle buses from the track to the hotel and back and forth. And then a lot of their day is in very uncomfortable positions over the car or under the car, working on the power unit, the engine. And there's days where they'll be at the track for 8 a.m. and maybe not get back until 10 or 11 p.m. And trying to find time for physical activity for these guys is incredibly difficult. And what we can end up doing when we're tired and exhausted is a very kind of catastrophic way of thinking of, well, I haven't got time to do anything meaningful, so I won't do anything at all. And physical activity is such a strong lever for change, for behavior change. And I asked one client in particular whether or not he felt he could do 2 push-ups on the side of the sink, on the counter, in his bathroom, in his hotel room after he brushed his teeth every morning. And he kind of laughed at me and said, are you joking? Is that all you expect me to do? I said, well, right now you're very time poor and you're tired, and so sleep is a priority. So we don't want you getting up super early to go to the gym. So can you just do 2 press-ups in your room? Yes, I absolutely can. And he messaged me 3 days in and said that he'd done 10 that morning. And I asked him then, what's the new expectation? And he said 10. And I was like, no, the expectation is still only 2. Because on days where you're busy or tired, we've still got this minimum amount that allows us to remain consistent. And in terms of effective behavior change, it's starting small is the key to success. These micro changes lead to macro results. And often when people are aiming to make behavior changes, they set goals that are perhaps too big and unrealistic for them to maintain. And we want this natural, sustainable change. And so starting small with these 2 push-ups a day, as he had more time, when he came home and in between races, we were starting to see that he was coming to the gym. Only for 15, 20 minutes at a time because he was very busy, particularly in between races if they were back-to-back race weekends. But the confidence that the consistency of doing these 2 press-ups a day made with him led to him joining the gym and buying a new exercise kind of clothing wardrobe that he hadn't had for maybe 15 years. And those micro changes, long term, will have changed his life. You know, Anna's alluded to things today like type 2 diabetes and hypertension and those kinds of things. And he was on that track because of his lifestyle factors and how sedentary he was. And something as insignificant or seemingly insignificant as just 2 push-ups a day has effectively changed his life for the long term, and not just affected his lifespan, but his health span. And so if there is anyone out there looking to make change, start incredibly small. And good things will happen and come from that. That's certainly what we found working with our trackside guys who are very, very busy and constrained with how much time they've got to be able to devote to making these changes to their levels of physical activity.
Wow, that's a great story. I could spend much more time with you guys to hear more about that, but I think we are running a bit out of time. So thank you both for all these exciting and practical insights. Some key takeaways for me: regular and varied physical activity is a core component for our health and well-being. Then I think the physiological effects of it on our mental fitness and stress resilience are often underestimated. People are actually individuals, and everyone needs to find their own rhythm and personal measures, maybe with some support from medical and health experts. That might be useful in certain cases. And then I think also very important, sustainable change takes time and a certain regularity. We look forward to having you all in the audience back for our next series. And now I wish you all a lovely rest of the day. Thank you so much, dear Anna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear Owen.
Thank you, Claudia.